y'all, it's Iggy, just here to give my review of Diablo 4's expansion, Vessel of Hatred. It's been roughly 3 weeks since the game came out, and I just wanted to give myself some time to get into the game and give it a fair shake. So let's start out with the launch day. Obviously didn't go as planned. Not only was it delayed, but when it did launch, there were issues of crashing, freezing, and lag, some of which are still an issue for players today. The most recent patch that released on October 29th definitely didn't help matters. If anything, it made it worse for those who had few or no issues to begin with. I myself crashed almost immediately upon logging into the game. I eventually fixed the problem, but it's kind of sad when we've come to expect a patch to make things worse before they get better. Now I understand it's nearly impossible for their QA team, or any QA team for that matter, to catch every bug in the game. However, when this bug was causing people to crash on launch or soon after attacking their first enemy, I feel a little bit more testing needs to go into these patches. It's sad when the joke of never play on patch day becomes an every patch reality. Next, we'll go into the campaign. Just a fair warning, there may be minor spoilers here, so feel free to skip this part if you just don't care to hear about it. I'll just say it started out strong, then fell kind of flat. You had me within the first 10 minutes, then started to lose me gradually over the entire campaign. I don't think I'm alone when I say it definitely felt too short, and there just wasn't a lot of substance to it. The ultimate climax, if we can even call it that, was rather bland, and I would say we didn't really accomplish anything. To be brutally honest, I felt like we ended off worse than when we started. Overall, I felt as if the story was written in haste and was just mostly there to help incorporate the new zone of Nahantu, rather than continue the actual story. Speaking of the new zone, I thought they did a good job with Nahantu, from the area as a whole to the new dungeons, strongholds, and even the music. Minor spoiler here, but going into the Durance of Hate and seeing the Hell Portal along with the layout brought back a lot of nostalgia from Diablo 2. Music was also good, not just in the new zone, but also for the Dark Citadel. I have enjoyed the new dungeons and strongholds. They're a nice change to what we had previously, although at the same time, I'm a little disappointed they didn't revisit previous strongholds or any of the dungeons and update them a little bit. Now, I know some changes have been made, but I still feel they need to go back and rework the majority of them. I've also enjoyed the new Tenants of Akarat now they've changed the renown system a little bit. Just a heads up, when you do find them all, they'll give you a new Nahantu lion mount. Moving on to the Mercenaries. Now I've used all of them except for Aldkin myself. They can be helpful at times, but I wouldn't say they're anything to write home about. They can add some decent utility, but I feel we wouldn't be missing out on much if we didn't have them either. A friend also pointed out to me that goblins may no longer appear on your minimap if you have Subo out. Not sure if this has changed in any of the recent patches since launch, but just thought I would throw it out there. Now I do like the fact that you can travel to the den whenever you want, which essentially gives us 2 favorite teleports. My only gripes with the Mercenaries is the fact that you can't have them out while in a group. For example, if you have 2 people in a party, each person should be able to have their own mercenary out. If a third joins, the party leader can have their mercenary out. Obviously, it'd be removed when a 4th joins. While I understand the reinforcement system helps this a little bit, it would make it better for smaller parties to be able to use their hired mercenaries as well. I also get the fact that the den is where you're supposed to go to swap out your mercenaries and spend your currency, but it would have been nice to have the ability to switch them out in any major town. Not a big priority, mind you, but just a small quality of life I feel they could add in later. Next up, let's talk about the endgame content. We'll start with the Undercity. Now, I've enjoyed the Undercity myself, but I think the rewards need a little bit more fine-tuning. Perhaps better options to be more specific with your loot drops, such as only dropping a specific piece of gear like only headpieces, boots, or rings. Now, a small nitpick I have is the fact that once you complete a run and you've killed the boss, a stash chest pops up for you to put away any items you just got. Now my question is, why can't this be added to the boss summoning rooms? It could either spawn immediately after the boss is killed, or just be on the outside of the arena you fight them in. Either way would work. Moving on to the Dark Citadel, as some of you may know, I'm a big advocate against forced co-op in Diablo 4. I feel it belongs more in MMORPGs rather than an action RPG. Now, I did make the prediction that it would be fairly easy content to get through, and that's pretty much held true for the most part. That being said, I have enjoyed the Dark Citadel, but I also see some issues with it as well. For starters, the rewards are rather lackluster for the amount of time spent. You get a handful of coins that you need to save up for all of the 5 weapon cosmetics. You also have a chance to get other cosmetics that only drop within the Citadel itself, which obviously forces you to go multiple times. I also recently found out that the cosmetics you can buy with coins also drop from within the Citadel itself. Meaning, if you're lucky enough, you don't have to save up those coins to buy those cosmetics if you don't want to. Once you already have all your cosmetics, and you've bought everything you've wanted, there's no real reason to continue to constantly go back in. Now they may add some new rewards, or if they add new wings along with new bosses, sure, I could see myself going back in, but after a while there'd just be no point. It's constantly running it every week. Now let's dive into runes, as I feel these still need a little bit more work. Right now it seems as if they are mostly being used to craft mythic uniques, rather than their intended purpose of making you stronger with your builds. While I have found some useful combinations even early on, there's definitely room to grow here. They're just sort of lackluster at the moment. They're not necessarily game-changing in the way that they were, let's say, in Diablo 2, but I didn't necessarily want that either. So I guess we'll just have to see what they come up with down the line. Last but not least, let's talk about the Spiritborn. Now I'll just start off by saying that at the beginning of the season, I made a minion necromancer and switched over to a Bloodwave Bone Spirit build, which was actually a lot of fun. Then I joined the dark side and I made a Spiritborn. Definitely reminds me of the monk from Diablo 3, and that's been a lot of fun as well. All that being said, I can understand people's frustrations of playing a class that feels weak in comparison to a Spiritborn. It's not necessarily that the other classes are bad. If anything, I would say they're in a pretty good spot right now. But it's obvious the Spiritborn is just dominating in every category. I'd like to see some more tweaks for Season 7 for both the Spiritborn and other classes, mind you. But we'll just have to wait and see what direction they take. Now let's transition over into the changes of the 2.0 patch and get away from the Vessel of Hatred itself. Obviously there have been a lot of changes with this patch, some good, some bad. I'm not going to go over everything, just going to highlight some things. Right off the bat, I do enjoy the difficulty changes. The fact that I can farm everything in Torment 1 if I so choose is a great addition for all players. It allows the more casual player base to stay where they're comfortable and the more enthusiastic crowd to enjoy themselves in higher difficulties. I think the switching of objectives for Pit and the Nightmare Dungeon was also definitely needed. It flows a lot better now. Another small issue I have is with the aspects. Now, we all know that aspects have a hard cap for items leading up to 750, and then ancestrals are supposed to fill the gap in the rest of the way. The only issue is, if you have an aspect with multiple levels and it needs an ancestral to cap out in order to max, that ancestral aspect can range anywhere from the base value all the way to the max value. For example, let's say you have an aspect that ranges from 40 to 100%. You can max it out at 80% using 750 items, but you would need an ancestral item with that specific aspect on it to go higher than 80%. The only problem is, if you find it on an ancestral item, it can range from anywhere between 40 and 100%, instead of starting at 81%. So what I would like to see is a change where the ancestral aspects start at just above the cap of a 750 aspect and can cap out easier. Taking my previous example, this would mean the aspect would start at 81% anytime you found it on an ancestral 800 item. I also think they should bring back the 4 sparks equals a specific mythic unique myself. Don't get me wrong, I don't want them to take away any current recipes we have for mythic uniques. I just want them to give us back the 4 spark equals 1 specific unique. Yes, runes are an abundance late game and you can even trade for them easily amongst all players, but I'm still in favor of having more options rather than taking options away. I do like the change they made to the tormented bosses only dropping uniques now instead of legendaries and uniques. We used to be able to fill up our entire inventory stash with just one boss and then have to go back constantly just to drop off our stuff. I would say my only gripe with the current boss system is the fact that we have so many boss materials that we have to keep track of. Yes, it is easy to get the boss materials this season. At the same time, I wish they would just kind of slim it down to one generic boss material for the first 4 bosses and then have a separate material for Andy and Duriel. And what I mean by this is get rid of Living Steel, Malignant Hearts, Distilled Fear, and Exquisite Blood. Turn them all into one universal material. Let's just call it a Sliver of Corruption, for example. Now you can use 4 of these to summon Varshan, Grig, Beast, and Zir. And then after killing them, they would drop 2 jewels of corruption anytime you killed them. 4 of these jewels would be used to summon Andy and Duriel. So now we don't have to lug around 8 different pieces and parts to summon bosses. There would only be 2 different types of boss summoning materials. They could also increase the stack size to 9,999 just in case, and then just call it golden. Next note I have is on opals. Now I do like the fact that you can use them for more things than just the Purveyor of Curiosities vendor. I like the fact that they added it into the season gimmick as well as the Undercity. That way I feel like I have a reason to actually hold on to them rather than just constantly gambling things at the vendor. I think that's a nice change and I'd like to see more of this down the line. Lastly, I want to talk about the seasonal content. While I have enjoyed the Realm Walker events, I was expecting more for this season than just another reputation grind with additional steps. I like the opals. I think they're a great addition to the season. I can understand not wanting to add too much to the season with all the new stuff coming out, but I was expecting a little bit more than what we got. Not to mention the fact that in order to gain reputation, you have to have one of these opals activated on you at any given time. This makes it a little bit more annoying. Hopefully by season 7, things will get back on track. Now in conclusion, I would just like to say I have been enjoying the expansion since launch. I know there have been a variety of issues as mentioned previously, and obviously I don't like everything that's changed, or not changed for that matter. I think one of the more glaring issues is the fact the expansion was released alongside all of the major base game changes. If anything, it just feels like another seasonal patch with a new zone and a new class. I said it back in the beginning that the base game needed at least another year in development, and Blizzard has pretty much proven me right. We've had constant updates to content and base game changes since Season 2, which followed all the way up to the expansion's release. While I understand it's a live service game and we're to expect constant changes, it also takes away the excitement for a new expansion when all we see is basically another seasonal update with a few more bells and whistles attached. For example, if they just added the Undercity along with the Dark Citadel for Season 6, and the expansion was delayed until Season 7 or further out, I don't think people would think much of it. Granted, people would have expected more with the expansion, as I'm sure they do now. Now, if you asked me if I would recommend the expansion, I would say if you're interested and have enjoyed the changes up to this point, it's going to be more of the same with some added content. So wait for a sale. I'm sure there will be either a Black Friday sale or something going on during the month of December, if not later. If you're at all skeptical, I would also suggest waiting for a sale, but keeping an eye on the changes they make between now and then. As of the posting of this video, the latest patch is causing quite a few issues amongst players just being able to play, which I'm sure will be fixed eventually, but it doesn't help the current situation right now. Having said all this, I would give the current state of the game a rating of 6 out of 10. Still has room to grow, and it's obvious from the new content of the expansion they need to go back and look at the older content and make some changes. I think the game still has potential, but I don't blame people for not liking the current version of the game either. All I can say is, I'm rather curious what the game will be like another year from now. Anyway, this has gone on long enough. Hope you enjoyed it. If not, feel free to leave a comment saying so. You know the rest. See you all in the next video.